Morning, everybody. How are we doing? This is Jeremiah, and we are having a webinar on shared online folders today. In case you're in the wrong class, that's the class you're in. We got some great technical information to go over for you. Is basically, obviously, shared online folders are totally the way to go for a lot of things, and absolutely, it's 100% recommended that you should store your LandFX folder in a shared online folder as well. But there's some technical considerations. Not all those shared online folders work the same, and the way we have to access files from inside of CAD. So we have all the fun technical details to go through for all the different providers. I just have a couple super quick housekeeping items. First, we are recording this, so it'll be available up on the website later today for you. And also, this is live. We're here, so you are able to ask us questions. And we didn't just record this and leave it there on the website as a recording. We want the interaction. So I would actually recommend you click that Q&A button at the bottom of the screen right now, because what's nice is you can get it situated, so it'll be a little easier when you do want to type in a question. But note, you're also going to be able to see the answers that I type to other people's questions. So it makes a fun little companion. Like I said, it's, we want a little interaction with you. We want the feedback, particularly with this. There's all these different providers of shared online folders. So I'm hoping that we nailed the one that you are using or thinking of using, any particular problems you've had. So please feel free to chime in with those sort of things. But that's enough of my housekeeping things. I'm going to get this handed over to Brian, who's going to take us away.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you everyone for being here. Welcome to our shared online folder webinar. We've got a lot to go over, so if you have any questions, I'm going to be stopping periodically to give space for explaining any specifics or show what this looks like in a real system. Why are you fighting me? There we go. So this is me. We'll skip right into it because we got a lot to go over. Real quick, I'm going to go over what is the LandFX cloud, what's not in the LandFX cloud, what a complete cloud solution is, what is a shared online folder, why you should use it, and then I'll start getting into the more technical stuff, mapping a letter drive, which shared online folder systems we've done incentives testing on, and then I'm going to roll into just if you want to go out on your own and pick something, that's cool. But there's some things you have to remember and know about them. And then finally, we'll wrap up with our recommendations. Okay, so please, please, please be aware. These examples, I have multiple LandFX folders and multiple shared online folders, all running simultaneously. Do not do this with your system. This is the cause of many headaches and heartaches and long hours of trying to solve which LandFX folder, which shared online folder. It's a mess when we run into it. So please, just one LandFX folder, one shared online folder for that LandFX folder. All right, so what is the LandFX cloud? We talk about cloud all the time, but what is the LandFX cloud specifically? So that is your projects, your templates, and your preferences. So when you switch to the LandFX cloud, you're moving either your MySQL database, if you're multi-user, or your SQLite database, if you're single user, and you're offloading that from your server or your workstation, respectively, onto our servers. So you'll never actually see these files on your computer. You can only see them in the FX projects dialog box within LandFX or in your preference sets, again, in LandFX. So if that's what's in the LandFX cloud, what's not in the LandFX cloud is everything you can see on your computer or your server. So all your custom blocks, your hatches, your fonts, all of your details, all the custom stuff you create, along with all of your backups. We're not a backup service. So if you say, I don't know, make some changes to a plant that you decide you're like, ooh, I didn't like that. Let me just roll that back. You'd need to go into your backups to do that. We only house your active database. So a complete cloud solution would be both switching your MySQL or SQLite database off of your server workstation and into our cloud, and moving your LandFX folder off of your hardware and into a cloud service. So in a traditional network configuration, you'd have one LandFX folder to rule them all, and that'd be housed on your server. And then all of your office computers would connect up to that server, and then any remote computers or users would need to use something like a VPN to connect over to the LandFX folder again on your server. So with a shared online folder configuration, you basically get rid of that server need. So each individual workstation has their own copy of the LandFX folder, and then use the shared online folder service to synchronize that across all of your workstations so they always look identical. So why go to all the trouble of doing that? There's a bunch of good reasons. First of all, eliminating your VPN. VPNs are inherently slow because you got a tunnel. It's always slow. There's no way around it. So let's get rid of that slowness so your remote users are happier. You may be able to eliminate your server entirely. If you're mostly using it for housing files, if it's mostly a file server, you can toss that and just use your shared online folder service to house all of those files. This also enables seamless sharing of your custom LandFX data with all of your users. It's faster to set up workstations because all you need is a computer and an internet connection, and you can get set up. Those shared online folder services typically have the ability to roll back changes. So rather than having to go to your backups to roll back a change, you can oftentimes just go to your service and then flip back a day or a few hours. And that goes right into recovering from disasters, because if something, flood, fire, cyber attack, you can just roll back. And again, backups are saved in the cloud, so you get another backup solution on top of whatever backup solution you're already using. So first things first, you got to map a letter drive. The way LandFX works with a shared online folder, you need a mapped letter drive for it to connect to. Fortunately, we've designed, or really Mike Bennett has designed, a drive mapping tool that takes most of the hard work out of it. Not only does it simplify the process, we just find your LandFX folder, select a drive letter, and click map. It also does a neat thing where it creates a startup script in your startup folder on your computer. This means that the notorious little red X on your mapped drive will typically be gone, because every time your computer reboots, it recreates that drive. So we get around the known Windows issue of losing your drive mapping on reboot. Now, when you're mapping a letter drive for your LandFX folder, it's important to map it to the actual folder location and drill down through the whole file path. So local disk C, users, Brian, OneDrive in this case, and then your LandFX folder. If you use one of the shortcuts in the quick access folder up here in the center, it's going to have issues. So just always remember that you want to map to the actual folder through the actual file path. All right, so historically, when we used to map letter drives, what we do is we'd use the localhost parameter so that we could redirect a drive map to a local file. Because again, you're going to be housing a LandFX folder on each user's computer. Windows does not natively want to do this typically. So what you use is a command that Windows provides called localhost to redirect back to that. Fortunately, with our drive mapper, you shouldn't have to mess with this, but just in case, it's here for you. Now, with everybody going to working from home about a year ago now, several of the shared online folder applications don't allow using the localhost command to map a drive letter. So specifically Google File Stream and OneDrive are known offenders. So what we found was a workaround for that, which is the subst command. And what that does is instead of creating a true mapped drive, it substitutes a file path for a letter. This is awesome. It's a great workaround. Problem is it always drops on reboot. So it's session specific. So our drive really Mike to the rescue with this cool script that recreates that subscript every time you reboot your computer. So as long as you're using the LandFX drive mapping tool, your drive should always show up. All right, so what shared online folder can you use? Now, basically any of them should work. The tricky bit is you've got to make sure that the LandFX folder has a local copy. So you can't do a cloud only solution. The AutoCAD and LandFX can't reach out to the internet to grab your files and pull them down on demand. They have to be either on a local server or on your local computer. The other thing that's really important is that the LandFX folder synchronizes in real time. So you can't use a batched system like DFS or Nasuni, where it's only synchronizing every 20 minutes, 30 minutes. You'll end up with conflicts because two people are working on the same thing, and then you end up with two of the same file, and your poor SOF doesn't know what to do. So it makes duplicates to save you from losing work. So the big three, the ones that you're probably most familiar with are OneDrive, Dropbox, and Google File Stream. These are the biggest names in shared online folders. This doesn't necessarily make them the best choice, but they are definitely the ones you're probably going to be most familiar with. So let's start with Dropbox. Dropbox, pretty straightforward. You go into your Dropbox web dialog, and you can just drop in your files, the Dropbox. So once you've done that, it'll allow you to share the files you just dropped in. You can share it with everybody or select specific users to share it with, and then give them edit permissions. And that's it. If you already have Dropbox and you need to add new team members, again, in the web dialog on the right-hand side, it's got this handy little plus sign next to team members. You just click on it and send them an invite. And then once they're invited, you can go into your admin console and you can go to the manage for your LandFX folder in content. And then from there, you can select new users to add in and give them edit permissions. Now, if you're on the single user version of Dropbox, that was the enterprise version, it's actually, again, pretty straightforward. You just go to your LandFX folder in Dropbox, right click on it and click share and select the users you want to share with and give them edit permissions. Now, like I was talking about, got to have that local copy of the LandFX folder. Now, this can be done from the shortcut that Dropbox creates for you. Once you go to that, you can right click on your LandFX folder, and then it's Smart Sync for Dropbox. Each one of these SOFs is going to have their own name for keeping a local copy, but they all do essentially the same thing. So you select Smart Sync and then click the check on to local, and you're good there. So Dropbox is about as straightforward as it gets. Do we have any questions about Dropbox?
Well, we've got a really good kind of a just generalized question on checking out files from shared online folders. It basically is it, do they have the ability to check out a file so that other people know that that file is open? And that's a good
Typically,
question. I don't know.
yeah, it's unfortunately, because we're going to be working off of a local copy of whatever file you're working on, you're not able to use typically a function for. So the way that would work would be you would have to be using the web version of a file for that to work. because it has to be able to tell everybody else that you're working on it. But because LandFX needs to be working on a local copy, you're not actually using the one on the internet, you're using the one on your computer. So typically that's not going to be available. There is an exception to the rule, but I'll get to that later.
Yeah, and I know at least with AutoCAD, AutoCAD creates a little hidden file. And so that file will say it's opened by someone else. And we have added additional logic for our detail system, so that our detail system and then AutoCAD itself in general will say that the file is opened by somebody else. So that's good news at least. But yeah, go ahead.
Cool. All right, so GFS, sorry, short for Google File Stream. So Google File Stream is one that creates its own drive letter for you. Typically, it's going to be the G drive. G for Google makes sense. Unfortunately, we can't use that one, so we've got to make another one for it. So back to that drive mapping tool of ours, runs the subst command, creates that shortcut for you, and you're good to go. So inside of GFS, if you're on the enterprise version, you're going to go into your drive and you're going to right click on your shared drives and create a new shared drive. Now you can give yourself a name for that drive. And then once that drive's created, then you right click on it again and you go to manage members and you add in whomever you want to be sharing that with. Now, again, in the right click on the shared drive you created and in manage members, you're going to be assigning them permissions necessary to allow them to edit these files. Again, just select your users, click on manage, and then you're able to assign content manager typically so that they can add, move, delete, etc. Now, if you're on the single user version of Google File Stream, you're going to drag and drop your LandFX folder into My Drive, and then right click on it once it's in there, and you can select Share. And then from there, you can add your users and again, give them editor permissions in this case, so that they can actually change the files in there when they want to. Now, Google has to have a local copy, just like all the other ones. So in this case, we can go to the G drive it creates, and then you're going to select your LandFX folder and right click on it, and then select Google Drive, and then theirs is available offline, their naming convention for keeping a local copy. All right, it's pretty straightforward for us. There's a lot more permissions and a lot more that can be done in the background, but for us, it's pretty straightforward. Do we have any questions on GFS?
Nope, no questions on that. I know we definitely have struggled a bit with it, and because of course, if Google keeps trying to, they keep rebranding it, for Google File Stream, then Google Drive, and then Google what was the other one, and anyway, so they're getting their things figured out, but I know I will just make a quick plug for it though, because it does work, it can work, but we do really like the G Suite. As a business owner having to pay for software things, that G Suite is just a fantastic deal and gives you this crazy amount of space on Google Drive. And so that's been our primary shared online folder for ourselves, and we really like it. So that's my only comment.
All right, so OneDrive. So OneDrive, because you're going to be in Windows, will typically already be installed. But if you're installing it, it has this handy little thing that lets you know this is what files look like when they're online only. Some of them are on the device, and when they're all local files. Now, OneDrive is a little different. You have to go into the OneDrive settings and you have to deselect files on demand, so that it will keep local copies when you tell it to synchronize. So you can manually share with users. once you drop your land effects folder into OneDrive, you can select it and then just type in the user's email, and that will send them a link. Now, the user on the other end has to go into their OneDrive, go into their shared files, then select the land effects folder, and then they have to tell it to sync. If they don't do this, then they never really, they're not able to have the files on their computer. So it's a little cumbersome, shall we say. Now, OneDrive Business is essentially SharePoint. And we highly suggest against using SharePoint because it has unreliable real-time sync. We haven't found a way yet to force a sync or to make it in real time, but some of my clients are using it and some have no issues. Some were only on it for a couple hours before they moved to something else. So your mileage may vary. But for SharePoint, again, this is one of those ones your user will need to manually go in and sync the files to their computer by using the sync button in OneDrive. So as you can see, OneDrive is a little more complicated. It's not as user-friendly. I ran into a significant number of issues when I was getting it set up. One of them was multi-factor authentication is on by default. You may like that, you may hate that. And then of course the real-time sync issues. But again, your mileage may vary. And if you're embedded in the Microsoft environment, then I understand if you want to try that. And if it works for you, awesome. You know, that's whatever works for you. We have any questions on OneDrive, Jer?
No, let's see. I guess we actually we did get one that just came in from Spencer, and he agrees. You know, they have SharePoint and the same issues. So, but he was wondering, should they have a separate admin OneDrive account to be the original folder owner, and then share that with the employees? Does that make sense?
You can do that. I think there's advantages to doing it that way. Rather than having it just one of your users being the origin of the land effects folder, having it be an admin account, which hopefully gets passed on to a new admin as one gets hired. You know, you pass that torch. Whereas if it's on a user's account, you're typically going to deprecate that account when they move on to a different job. And so you may have issues with losing connection, or, you know, it does make sense to do it in that manner.
Okay, so that's a good one. And then he follows up. So does it use individual space in a shared folder?
Does it use individual space?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Do you mean on the user's computer? Because yes, it's absolutely going to use space on their hard drive or their SSD.
Oh, I guess it's probably their individual quotas.
I did
Yes.
not dig into that. Yeah, you'd have
I
to
know.
check with your.
Yeah, because I know I had ran into that once. One of the first ones that I helped with, and we got the blend fix folder ported over, and then it just killed the quota. And that was with Google Drive when we were just working with us. So yeah, that's that's another one is the quotas, and that's true. Is if you've got those quotas installed or activated like Google, the lower tier Google Drive has those, and yeah, if the one user copies everything up to the land effects folder, it's going to use up their gig of space real quick. So that is a good point. We'll put a pin in that thought and keep going.
Yeah, because unfortunately, I tested on the enterprise version of all of these, so there was essentially no limit on my space. So I never ran into that with testing. So that's an excellent point. All right, so those are our big three, but if you're a big company, you might want to go with an enterprise solution. You have multiple locations, you got 400 plus users, something like that, then maybe an enterprise is going to be better for you. So we'll knock Carbonite off the list right at the beginning. Carbonite had been on our list of viable shared online folders for years. And after some significant time testing, it turns out that they deprecated that. Carbonite Endpoint used to support real-time syncing, but doesn't anymore. Carbonite's still an excellent choice for backups, but just for backups. So Ignite, I know we've got some of our clients on Ignite and did some testing on that. It turned out to be pretty good. It's relatively straightforward. So once you're in your Ignite console, you can upload either via the upload button or just drag and drop, which is what I tended to do because, that's what it is. Now, once you've got your files in there, you're going to need your admin to go to the hamburger or the three little bars and then go into settings and then go into select users and groups, then add new account. And then you can go select permissions for your new user when you're going to add users to your Ignite. And note the permissions level here is not permissions for the land effects folder. This is permissions to your Ignite account. So probably most of your users are going to be standard users. Now, once you've got the land effects folder in there, it's just going to automatically show up in your shares. So that's nice. Now, you can also share your files as soon as you drop them in if you're already in Ignite and just clicking the share uploaded files. Now, when you get a new user, you add them in. They're going to need to log in to Ignite. They'll get an email that they have to confirm with. And then they can click on the try the desktop app, which will install it. And Ignite's another one that creates its own drive. We're going to need to map a drive letter for it anyway, because unfortunately, it doesn't work that great. So when I installed it the first time, I went ahead and I moved where the shared files would be located. So when I installed the desktop app for Ignite, I moved them over to my C drive. Still ends up with my name and the file path and all of this. So we still want to map a letter drive. Now note, if you use the default folder location when you install the Ignite local app, it will place that folder in app data. Now, app data is a hidden file. So you have to turn on hidden files and folders so that you can map a letter drive for it. It's just something to be aware of. So folder permissions. So now that you've got your land effects folder in there, you've got your users added in, you can select your land effects folder in the Ignite console, and then you can manage click share and then manage the folder permissions. And then from here, you can select your users and then give them full permissions. Should be sufficient for their use of the land effects software. Now, again, we need to have a local copy. So it's nice with Ignite, you can just go to the shortcut that it creates, select your land effects folder, and then I like their naming convention is sync for offline access. Each one of these has their own name for the keeping a local copy, same thing. One of the reasons we don't suggest OneDrive is it really should have an IT admin to configure and manage it. If you're going to use something like that, you might as well use something that is often a better option like Ignite that doesn't have those synchronization issues. Do we have any questions about Ignite?
Yeah, which is just my question, which is how did they come up with that spelling? I bet they hired some high-priced consultant and went through all these options and they're like, Ignite, but spelled funny.
All right, so Panzura. This is the big dog. This is a hybrid solution. I know we talked earlier about whether or not you could do, was it file locking? Panzura is your solution to that. Now, Panzura is an enterprise grade operating system that runs on hardware that you provide. So you will need an on-premise server for this solution, and a pretty beefy one. 6 CPUs, 16 gigs of RAM, at least a terabyte of SSD, not hard drives. So that, and then you also need to contract with a cloud service like AWS, Google's cloud, Azure, IBM cloud. You need a cloud service on top of that. Now, seems like a lot for what do you get, right? Well, Panzura has what they call simultaneous burst data sync. It's a mouthful, but what it does is it makes it so that everything's synchronized across everybody all the time, and it is pretty rad. So what they do is their Panzura OS, it does data consolidation. So it deduplicates, which means it removes copies, duplicates of your data, and then compresses it. So it minimizes the cloud storage and that you need. And that simultaneous burst sync, we were testing it out. It is so fast. I mean, it's pretty amazing. So if you are a larger company, and really this is for companies with more than one location, dropping that VPN and using this, oh man, it makes absolute sense. Because it's just so fast. And for your users, they're accessing data locally. So it's super fast, and you know you're on an SSD because that's part of their requirements. So it's blazingly fast. There's some other cool stuff they do. Their file lock. So normally when you're sharing across multiple locations, file locking doesn't function correctly, particularly like the AutoCAD one. Panzura has their own file locking system that eliminates versioning issues. So that's pretty cool. And it also protects against ransomware attacks, and it's got military grade encryption on it. So, you get a ransomware attack, you just revert to a snapshot. And ever since, everybody started working from home, Panzura has been working really hard on their mobile product. Now, this is what you would give to your remote users. So anybody outside of the office would install the Panzura mobile app, and that would do the synchronization to a user off in the woods. The downside of this is that the mobile app is not able to lock files the same way that the server version does, which basically just means that it's the same as any of these other SOFs we've talked about today. If you have any, sorry, do we have any questions about Panzura?
No, it's I remember working with it was Disney uses Panzura, linking up their 5 different worldwide sites, and so we were helping them with the land effects stuff, and agreed, saw the same thing. We copy over the land effects folder, and it's just appearing on the other ones instantly, and we're like, this is really fun actually. But yeah, it's got to be really expensive, right?
I mean, just the hardware cost for your location, when they started, and that was their absolute base level, because they wanted, we couldn't really trial it. I didn't have the the
Yeah.
2 servers I would need to do a true test of it. But those specs I was talking about are for the absolute minimum. So it goes up from there, and that's just the hardware.
But if you've got multiple sites, though, I mean, it's really almost even a no-brainer. I mean, certainly compared to like if someone's going, oh, we're going all with the OneDrive and SharePoint, and just SharePoint coordinating multiple office locations, I don't see how it ever worked myself, but would definitely recommend Panzera for that.
Yeah, I've worked in SharePoint in a previous life, and it is unreliable is the best praise I can give it.
Yeah. So anyway, all right.
All right, moving on. Okay, so, and those are just 5 of the options I got through in the time allotted. There's so many more. There's Amazon Drive, there's Box, there's Sugar Sync. Heck, we didn't even know, I hadn't heard of Peer, but the Panzura people said, yeah, Peer's great for what you're looking for. So there's tons of options. I've even heard somebody was using Western Digital, the hard drive company. They have a synchronization application for that. They were using that. So, I mean, you could use essentially anything, but there's a few things you have to remember. So map a letter drive. So you need to make sure that whatever SOF you use, you're able to map a letter drive. And usually you can use our drive mapper, even if it's not one of the ones we've specifically designed it with. But you gotta note, some of the SOFs don't allow direct drive mapping. We had to use that subst command. Some of them bury your land effects folder in a hidden file, like an Ignite does. So be aware of where your files are getting cached locally, so that you can map a drive for it. You need to make sure you're able to give full read-write permissions to all of your users. So if they can't read and write to the land effects folder, they're going to end up with errors. We see this sort of thing all too frequently. Error creating folder, error writing to file, and that's typically going to be a permissions issue because they don't have permission to do so. You need to be able to keep a local copy of the land effects folder, and you need to be able to know where that is. So with a pure cloud solution or a pure cloud share, what happens is they leave a shortcut on your computer for your file in the cloud, and it only grabs it when you ask for it. Saves space on your hard drive. It's real cool, but for land effects, what happens is AutoCAD asks for a file, or AutoCAD and land effects asks for a file. Your shared online folder system then reaches out to the cloud looking for that file and trying to download it. And by the time it gets it onto your computer, it's timed out and you've got an error that's not available, or no function definition like this, or the shared online folder just doesn't even respond to the request. It doesn't recognize it as a request for a file. So you have to have a local copy of your files. And it needs to synchronize in real time. You can't use a batched system. So I see this every once in a while, and it sucks because it causes file bloat. Basically, what happens is you have two users accessing the same file on their local computer. So if the synchronization isn't happening in real time, then when one user edits a file, the other user is able to edit the file, and they're not being copied at the same time. So when your SOF catches up, it looks and it goes, oh, I have two different files for the same file. Well, I'll just make a duplicate and add a sequential number after it, and I'll let the users sort that out, which, it doesn't necessarily cause issues. What it does show up as you'll see in the slide, is file bloat typically. Sometimes it causes issues as well, but I mean, just having dozens of the same file over and over again, it just makes a mess. So our recommendations. So our favorite for small to medium business is Dropbox, honestly. It's easy to install. It's easy to share files. Drive mapping straightforward. They've got good support. It's inexpensive. Downside to it is the permissions are real simple. And so if you need to have granular permissions for different tiers of users, it's not going to be a good choice for you. And it's really just for file sharing. It doesn't have the robust features of, say, Google File Stream and the Google Suite. But if you're a smaller business, 2, 3, 4, 5 users, oh yeah, Dropbox is the way to go. Just so easy and straightforward. Now, if you're a big business, Panzura. They've got the real file locking. Their support's really good. It scales infinitely. It's a backup solution. It's protection against malware. Users just see a letter drive. Doesn't have any complicated drive mapping involved with it. Downside to it is you need to have a dedicated IT admin for it, and it is expensive. And speaking of that, don't be afraid to call IT professional. if you're not comfortable with doing any of this. You know, I love driving my car. I drive it every day. I drive it fast. I race it. I don't fix it. Something goes wrong with it, I call my mechanic. I have him fix it because I'm not a professional at that. I didn't go to school for it. So, I mean, if you're a landscape architect and this feels above your head, that's okay to reach out to somebody who's a pro. Probably saves you money in the end because it saves you time. All right, and that's shared online folders. Do we have any questions? Does anybody want to see this in real time? I've got a couple of VMs set up where I've got all of these installed, sans Panzura, and I can show what they look like in real life.
Oh yeah, I think that'd be a great idea to show, let's at least show Dropbox because it's our main recommendation and all that. And I just had a quick comment in terms of recommendations. As you're, configuring your shared online folder and getting it set up, the one thing I would um, absolutely stress is we have had users, and you would think, oh, what a landscape architecture office. No, we've had users get hit by ransomware. And these are not large multinational design firms. These are like medium-sized design companies. So absolutely involve an IT professional and go through the process of what is your ransomware protection, because it is possible that it could hit your Dropbox as well. And so you don't you don't want to just one day, because one of your employees clicked on some email, to just have every file locked away and be forced to pay thousands of dollars in Bitcoin to get access to it. So you're going to want to don't treat a shared online folder as like that's the perfect complete solution for all backup purposes. You still want an additional backup level, which is basically just as simple as pulling everything from your Dropbox or shared online folder to some offline storage. You just get a little terabyte SSD that you plug in occasionally. You run a little backup script and it pulls and backs up everything to that. Then you unplug that SSD and put it back in a fire safe. It's as simple as that. So do please always consider that. But yeah, let's go ahead and dive in and show like how Dropbox works, and we'll kind of go from there.
All right. So, let's see. You can log into Dropbox, and it looks like it remembers me, and I am on a trial, but just enough time to take care of this for you folks. So we can go and jump onto our shared files just by logging into your Dropbox console, and you can see there's my land effects folder. It's got a number 4. Like I said at the beginning of this, I have a lot of land effects folders. I'm going to trash these VMs when I'm done with this because there's such a mess. It's easier to just build a new one than it is to try and clean it all up at this point. But that's our recents. We can go into our folders. That's our folder. If you want to share that, you can just click over here. You can add whoever it is you want to share it to, and your permissions are right here. It's super simple. They can view it, they can edit it. Just that's as easy as it gets. And if you need to send this to a bunch of people, you can create a link, and you can just like say you've got, I don't know, 8 designers and you don't want to type in each user's email. Just create a link, and then you can just copy that link, and you can see the little link down here and just send it to all your users in an email and get them all set up at once. So that's super easy there. And then Dropbox, Dropbox creates its own land effects folder you can see here. Or it creates its own shortcut folder in your file explorer. But we don't want to use that one. So Dropbox is my L drive. So you can easily see, let's see, if I go into, should be this one. I can create a new folder here. It's my test. So create a folder in that shortcut, and you'll see that it shows right up here in my mapped drive. So we can see that that's functioning correctly. It's a real quick way to test whether or not you've got that drive mapped right. Is just throw one in the link that it creates, and you can double check that. And then from within AutoCAD, and this is something that I didn't really go over, but you want to make sure that your support path is set correctly for your drive. So if you go into your options, and the first tab is file, and the first option is support file search path. And don't be fooled, that's not a lowercase l, that is an I. So this is one way to fix this. I just change that to L. And then these other ones, it's kind of cool. Land effects just recreates them for you. So you can just drop those. Apply that, hit OK. And then just start AutoCAD back up again. And we can see that I haven't updated the land effects folder that is in Dropbox because it would have given me this alert earlier. So I'm going to cancel that. Don't cancel that if it's you. Also, have the checkbox checked for making backups, because you make your backups for your company. Another good thing to note, when you're on a shared online folder system like this, when one person skips making a backup, that's everyone skipping making a backup, because you're all essentially sharing the same land effects folder, even though they're all separate folders on each user's computer. When you run an update, you have the option to back up. Make the backup. I know sometimes it takes a few minutes. Grab a cup of coffee, come back. It's usually first thing in the morning, and you've made sure that you've got backups for your entire company. So many times I've hopped on, there's something wrong, we need to roll back, and I look and it's been 2 months or 3 months since anybody's made a backup. And that's because everybody's decided that backing up is for somebody else to do. That's not their responsibility. It's everybody's responsibility when you're on a shared online folder system like this. So we can go back into our options, and we can see that that land effects folder is set there, and it's recreated that fonts and patterns folders for you. So I guess I should show. Pop back into the Dropbox. And if, say, you haven't set this up yet, you can. Oop, is it fighting me now? That's what I get for trying to do this on the fly. I'll pop back into the admin console. So this is the admin console. It's a little bit different. I'm going to delete this land effects folder. So I can show you what that looks like. So from the admin console, you just, I grabbed an empty folder. Now it should be happy. It still thinks it's empty. Okay, fine. You win. I will grab an actual land effects folder. All right. There we go. So I thought I'd be clever and make it super fast. by dropping in an empty land effects folder, and Dropbox said no. So here's what I was talking about with, you can, when you drop in your land effects folder, if you're already part of Dropbox, um, you can just share it to everybody, give them edit or view permissions, or you can cherry pick, and you can decide who gets shared with, who doesn't get shared with, and it gives you the, I can just collect, let's say support's going to be the one, and we can just upload for just the support account. And that's, Dropbox is just so easy. It's just, it's drag and drop. And it is, I don't know, Jerry, you'll have to see if you can correct me on this. I think Dropbox was the first one I ever heard of doing this sort of thing.
It was the first. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm just super, I was, Dropbox was the first one I tested. And then as I got into the rest of the testing with all the other systems, it was just so easy. It was just so easy to set everything up. It was a breeze. I mean, it took me almost no time at all, compared to, the days I spent on some of these other ones. So, is there anything specific anyone wanted to see?
Well, we do have another really good question from Spencer, I don't know if we're really going to be able to answer it so perfectly. I mean, I took a stab at it, but he was wondering if, basically if a local server can basically have the shared online folder set to available offline. And if that local server can just share all that content over the local network, basically, not having to install the shared online folder on every workstation. And that should, in theory, be possible. I don't think that's necessarily impossible, but who knows? Depending on the provider, it would just definitely need to be tested.
It's absolutely possible. We have clients who are configured in that way. Panzura specifically, that's how its default configuration is. The downside to that is, now you're having to use your network to access the land effects folder. And part of the reason why we think that shared online folders are the best way to go is because you've got a beast of a computer that your CAD people are working on. It's got an SSD that's just amazingly fast. You got M.2 SSD, and you've got your land effects folder. It's blazingly fast if it's right there on the computer. If you have it on your server, well, now you got to go through a switch, you got to go through a router, and then you got to wait for the server to respond. There can be some delay, and depending on your configuration, your mileage may vary. But absolutely, it's absolutely a valid way to set that up. We have clients who their users who work in office just connect up to the server, and the server synchronizes to the shared online folder, and then their remote users have the shared online folder installed locally on their computers. So that is a valid way to configure it.
And then the one thing I would add is, the thing I do also like about that is, like I was saying, is that increases your chances of having backup procedures in place. So you have this local server which has all the shared online folder pulled down, and so it's very easy to just simply make a backup of any piece or part of it all at once. So it's a thought, but obviously, it does feel a little dated. It does feel like, if you're talking about future proofing something, where are we going to be in 5 years and 10 years? And that's what I really like about all the shared online folder options. And there are really good cloud backup solutions, like the Carbonite. Carbonite works great with a service like Dropbox. So you can be using Dropbox and then use a service like Carbonite to kick over a backup to there. So everything is basically being done in the cloud. The concept of why even have a local server is definitely a something to ponder.
Yeah, I think the the days of um, having to pay for a big local server are starting to disappear. Internet connections are getting better and better. We got Starlink going up. We got Jared. Do you know how many satellites Elon has now? We're getting to the point where they're doing actual beta testing. There's people who have beta tests of that. So you can connect to 5G or gigabit internet soon anywhere in the world. Actually, all you have to do is be able to see the sky. So
Yeah,
we're
it's
getting to the
not
point
also
where
yeah, it's what's also really common in other countries that they're just running Ethernet to residences. That was, for instance, that was China's big push, is they're just running gigabit Ethernet everywhere. So they don't have that weird layer of this private company that you give money to, and then the provider has this all that they're just running state-owned networking to everywhere. And a lot of like apartment complexes and things are doing things like that, where they just simply run Ethernet. And so you just simply have a really good network wiring wherever you are. And yeah, exactly, from that mindset, going cloud is definitely the way to go.
I think the biggest downside to it is local hard drive space or local SSD space, is that you do have to chip in for that local SSD space. But I mean, truthfully, the prices have come down so much on SSDs. I mean, I'm embarrassed how much I spent on my 1 terabyte some years back compared to what they cost now.
It's pretty wild.
Yeah,
So, I think we're going to say we've reached the end of another fantastic webinar. I hope everybody enjoyed this. Do keep the ideas coming in for what you want to see in future webinars. We do rely on that. And, any questions or further comments, of course, on this are always welcome. Always just drop us a line. We love hearing from you guys. Other than that, have the usual fantastic weekend. Stay safe. Enjoy the weather if you have good weather. And hope you get your shot soon. My parents just got their first round shot, so I'm excited about that. So have a great weekend, everybody, and we will see you soon.
cheers.